We're trying something new here on Real World Test Drive, news updates. In today's episode, we talk to one of the giants in automotive PR, Jim Trainor. He's stepping down after more than 3 decades in the industry.
Well, this will surprise you a little bit. I started at Ford in 1984. So, it's been 37 years roughly. And there were a couple things in between where I left the industry to go get rich during the IPO days. That didn't work out so well. And you realize when you're gone from the auto industry, just how special it is and how much you miss it. And what we do, the products that we deal with, the people that make up, our universe, there's nothing else like it.
So Jim, for a lot of people, I mean, there's been the diversification and some would say democratization of news. When you started at Ford in the mid 80s, tell me about how many contacts you had or how many contacts you needed. There's a really interesting comparison.
Yeah, it's a great question, Grant. We had an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. In the bottom quadrant were the 5-digit extension numbers for the other Ford PR people, and the rest were the media contacts. And that was it. That's who we dealt with. And it was automotive news. It was the wire services. It was the Detroit media outlets, TV, radio, print, news and the free press, LA Times, Wall Street Journal, New York Times. But that was the extent. If you knew those people, you knew everybody that needed to be known. And today, I learned that number of new people monthly. With all the various websites, podcasts, all the social media platforms. So I think just the growth in the number of journalists, and sometimes that's a word that's misconstrued because these aren't all journalists that we're working with, but the number of communicators, the number of people watching the industry is, it's 100 times what it was when I started. And I think, Grant, from as long as you and I have been working together, relationships are important to me. And I think relationships are important to PR people who do their jobs well. And when you needed to know the people on a sheet of paper, that's different than having to know hundreds and hundreds of people. So it's a real challenge to stay up with those people, and also to know who are the important ones, and who are the ones that really you don't need to focus on, who you really need to share information with. So that would be the number one thing that comes to mind on what's changed.
So Jim, from when you started in the 80s to now, is the job as an automotive PR professional harder or easier?
Well, I guess I tend to say it's harder just because, that's what you automatically say when you talk about where you are currently, because you forget things that have happened. But I think they're probably about the same. But here's one big difference, Grant. When someone like Alex Taylor from Fortune magazine would come to you in the 80s or 90s and say, hey, I'm looking at a feature story on Ford Motor Company, you knew you'd be working with Alex for the next 4 to 6 months. And that was interviews and photo sessions and fact checking and answering question after question. That was difficult work, but because there were so few outlets then, you knew that he would really spend a lot of time on getting the story, and you better have your facts straight. Today, I'll get 10 emails a day saying, hey, doing a story on Hyundai, can you help me out with this? There's no depth to it. It's something that's going to appear in a matter of hours. It's just different. Both are tricky. I've always felt that, PR people are the kind of the conscience of the company, right? Because a lot of what you read about a company comes through us. So that's always important, whether it was, 37 years ago or yesterday. So I think they're challenging. They were challenging times then, they're challenging times today.
Let me ask you about that. You say that the PR people are the conscience of the company. Tell me about that.
Well, I think because what in big part, what people learn about companies is something that's been filtered through the PR group. You may not realize it, but you go to websites, you go to social media feeds, anything you read about a product, about a process, about a person, we had a hand in it. And I think that's why what PR people do is so important, because what we say matters and it sticks and it's there forever, especially
Are
today.
cars
Right?
better or worse than they were then? Or
Oh,
is that not a judgment? Is that
I
not a
think
judgment?
they're clearly better. I would say, I mean, when you're saving lives, when you're using less fuel, when you can help stay in your lane, when you can get anywhere without pulling out the maps. I mean, do people even know what maps are anymore? I think about my early days, my first job at Ford was writing for a dealer magazine. So I've been in 49 out of the 50 states. I've traveled this country, and I'd go to dealerships and I'd write a story about something great they were doing, whatever. It was always kind of a challenging time to, you show up at an airport at 10 o'clock at night in some town, you're in Cheyenne, Wyoming. I don't know where the heck I'm going to find my hotel. And then I got to find the dealership. I mean, you relied on maps. Isn't that crazy? Um, so
I don't know about you. I can never refold them. There are two types of people in the world: people who can refold the map, and then people who can't. And I don't know. Maybe you've always been very organized. You could probably refold the map.
I'm pretty anal that way. I had to have it so it was right back with the cover, in front, not in the back or in the middle somewhere. But I would struggle with it. So I mean, they're so fantastic what they are today. And I hate saying they're computers on wheels, because they're really more than that. Your life, now with not just wireless CarPlay and Android Auto, but your phone is your key if you want it to be. And it's just amazing. I will say some of the fun might not be there. I mean, if I could have a 1970 Boss 302 Mustang that didn't have pedestrian detection or accident avoidance or blind spot detection or rear smart parking assist, I'd still have a good time in that car. But just, if you just looked at fuel economy or the types of fueling, for example, we didn't have to talk about hydrogen, just talk about hybrids. Um, it's they're amazing. I mean, we've got an Elantra that gets over 50 miles to the gallon. 50.
Where do you see the future? In my opinion, I think that the driverless revolution is happening much, much faster than most people realize. The
Yeah.
autonomous vehicle revolution
Yeah.
is coming very quickly. What's your take?
Hmm. I I think we'll see autonomous pretty quickly in different sorts of settings or applications. Delivery, trucking. I don't. I think there's going to still be quite a bit of a lengthy period before you and I just hit an app and something pulls up in front of our house. We get in it. It just takes us where we're going. We're not even paying attention. But I think it could happen fairly quickly, that your pizza gets delivered or your groceries get delivered by some unmanned contraption with probably four wheels, but who knows, might be even less, drones and the rest of it. I think the most interesting thing, though, is the connectivity part of all this, how cars talk to one another, how they talk to the infrastructure around them, how safe they can become.
I hate to make you feel old, but you've been doing this a while, and you're an
I have.
extremely well respected member of the automotive communications world. You've always been a straight shooter. You've never been knowingly inaccurate on anything you've ever told me or anybody I've ever
True.
worked with. What do people coming into the business now need to know? Somebody who wants to go into automotive communications now, what do they need to know about the changing dynamics, or are there still just basically beautiful basics that were the same in the 80s as they are now?
So two kind of sets of answers. One, something that has been there as long as I've been doing this, that's at least as important today as it was back in 1984, is truth, integrity, and response time to media requests. Truthfulness and integrity. We've got nothing if you don't have that. Responsiveness, more important today with the, just how fast we move. And our team at Hyundai has goals and objectives on how long I expect them to respond within. The other thing I'd say that's relatively new is you need to have really good presentation skills, Grant. So often now the PR person is found in the boardroom presenting results of programs or events or just trends, whatever it might be. You've got to come into the industry now and be someone who can get up in front of a group of people and communicate effectively to them about what you're doing. We've always gotten by a little bit on being kind of more art than science. And certainly there are things that we can't fully explain as far as our effectiveness. We just know that here's why it worked. But to the executives that say, well, if you can't measure it, don't do it. We've got to be able to have some sort of answers to present to people. Here's why we exist. Here's why we are important. I want to give you one real example. We just launched our Tucson, which is coming next year, but we did a Zoom world reveal of it probably 6 weeks ago. The day after our video went around the world, 14 times more people had visited the consumer website for Tucson. So we drove that much traffic, 14 times. And remember, there are thousands of people that are just looking there anyway. That's the kind of thing that we've got to be able to communicate to management today more than ever. What is our benefit? And can you get up and convince a room full of executives why it's important that we're doing what we do?
Congratulations. And
thank you, Grant.
You've been wonderful to work with. Any idea what's next?
No, and that's what I'm mostly excited about. I'm going to wake up January 4th and not have any idea what I'm going to be doing. Rather than have 20 things I have to do, I'm just going to say, that's one thing about what you do and what I do, meaning what media and PR people do. In my 13 plus years at Hyundai, I've never had a day off. Never. There's never been one day in over 13 years where I didn't have phone call, text, email. But that's just the job, man. And the company never goes away. The company never sleeps. That means we got to be right there with it. And that's a long run, a long haul. So I that's another thing to probably to share with your listeners, but I'm ready to take a break after 37 years, and we'll see what happens. In our COVID world, I'm limited in what I can do, because I'm not going to tell you, hey, on January 4th, I'm jumping on a plane to Ireland. So we'll wait and see.
I know I speak for a lot of my colleagues on this side of the camera, saying it's been a pleasure to work with Jim all these years. And he's always been one of the really good ones. In other words, somebody who got back to you, got the facts right, and was still pleasant no matter how difficult the news was. For a Real World Test Drive, I'm Grant Winter reporting from Washington.